the mistrust that can form between sales, product and dev, and really, I would imagine the executive committee and the board. It's such a prevalent thing because, like you said, there's all of these misalignments. There's confusion about what the problem actually is. There's disbelief, because I think that's probably the biggest killer, right? The moment that happens, the problem is 10 times harder than it was the day before, because now you've got to work together. And now you're thinking through hindsight, or maybe having seen it be addressed. What are some recommendations you might make, especially between sales and the engineering organization? Because I think that, to me, has always felt so out of sync in a lot of these companies. I've been in the role where it's like, I just want to talk to the salesperson. Like, can we figure this out? And that, for some reason, is always very difficult.
I think a key is actually starts at the CEO. I think the CEO or the president of the company needs to reset the tone and reset some of the incentives, and whether they're specific incentives like compensation, or they're just expectation setting. Because what I've seen is the CEOs want it all. They want to fulfill the customer need in the short term, and they want to have the long-term technical plan. And so I think, what if the CEO can come into reality, address reality, and say, these are the short-term pains we're all going to feel to get us to this new, better, wonderful, brighter future, and lay that out. I think that gives a more fertile ground for the head of the technical side, whether it's a CTO, and the head of sales or revenue, to collaborate, because that is the piece. Like, you have to be willing to make short-term sacrifices, and both sides need to make short-term sacrifices for the long-term better future. So it's 1 + 1 = 3, in that the engineering and the sales team both need to be grounded in the same version of reality, and they need to have confidence that they are both not going to be asked to fulfill every short-term commitment and every long-term commitment that the CEO has, or the board has, set forth, because it is impossible to do that without a massive injection of capital or resources, or other external factors changing. So I think everyone needs to be on board. Like, we're going to take our medicine now. This is what the medicine's going to look like. It's not just the sales team taking their medicine. It's not just engineering taking their medicine. We are all going to take our medicine. This is what it looks like. And this is why. This is the 1, 2, 3 year plan. But when I've seen the onus fall entirely on one team to sacrifice in the short term, I think it does a lot of damage. When it comes to morale, it does a lot of damage.
And as part of that medicine taking, have you seen something I don't know how to describe as the per customer feature demands versus the more broad, what is the benefit of implementing this in the entire product in a way that benefits the business in the long term? That tension where the short-term thinking was paying off, you were converting leads faster, but you were incurring more debt because you were building so many one-offs for specific customers.
Yeah, and that's the crux of it, right? And I've been there with it. When it's a habit to break. And I think, in my experience, like, whether you have a customer advisory board or you have a group of customer advisors, you need to be transparent and get them on board with the plan. Because if they can also see, thinking of your biggest key customers, why you're going to be saying no in the short term to some of the things that you used to not say no to, and what that long-term payoff is for them. And if that long-term payoff and that 1, 2, 3 year plan addresses their needs, I've seen that work. And I've personally had those conversations with executives and with board members of, okay, we're going to say no now. And I'm sorry, it's going to be really uncomfortable. I know it's going to put you in a hard spot, but this is why. And I mean, obviously working with the team to see if there's anything that you can do that kind of gives them a little bit of a cookie, like, okay, whether that's pricing, whether that's something else they want, but then enrolling them. And this is making sure that what you're building is going to address them in the long term. I would also say in some cases, you may just have a bad fit customer and you've been bringing them along and they've been costing way more than they're worth. It is never worth keeping a bad fit customer. And so that would be, hey, customer, like, this isn't working. Whether that's because of the customer's demands, whether that's because of the customer's use cases, maybe they're using the product in a very different way, but having that very open and transparent conversation and trying to like kill that dead weight. Those are two things that I've seen help to then give you the breathing room that you need on the engineering side to not be constantly putting out fires and to instead be building.
I don't even know if this exists, but to be able to have some sort of KPI or measurement of the dead weight per customer.
I was going to say, how often, I don't know that happens as often as it should, is probably the right way to put that. But that's interesting. It's tricky because I think as you're working with these startups on their journey from 0 to like, let's say 5 million, so much of that is opportunistic sales, right? And it's, you have a vision, but that vision might need to change. And so you're doing the thing out of necessity that you hope you don't keep doing after some point. And there's this transition moment, which is probably very difficult to say, well, when you get here, stop doing that. Where the things that have helped you be successful all of a sudden start to lead to some toxicity. It's got to be fascinating from your perspective, because in your work with these early stage companies, and I would imagine you probably see this most in that 5 million category. Like, are you seeing things where you're just like, okay, this is good for now, but man, that's probably going to be a problem later?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest one is relying on personal networks. I think that's the biggest one. Like you hire a sales rep or you hire 2 sales reps and they have really extensive personal networks and they've built your first few $1 million of sales through their personal networks. But there are some exceptions. But in most cases, you've actually not proven that you have a sales motion that works. You've proven that if people get to know about your product, they want to buy your product. So I think that's one for sure in that, like, I'd say like $2 to $5 million range. Of course, you can look at the renewal numbers on that, and that will give you a better indication of like, is there true product market fit there? But I've seen that a lot of just relying on personal networks. And anytime you have a single point of failure, especially when that person isn't a founder, I would say it's different if it's a founder, because that network couldn't go anywhere. That's a big one. I would say more often, though, I see people trying to scale sooner than they should. That's actually the way bigger problem, is people with 1 or 2 customers trying to then build this super scalable sales process or planning documents or opportunity criteria, or even at a few $1 million, they're like, oh, we need to hire this big sales team. And it's a crawl, walk, run. It is not a crawl, run. And so I think that is more often people skipping steps of, okay, we did a whole bunch of things that aren't scalable. Now let's peel some of those off. Let's keep doing some of the ones that are most critical, but what do we think we can do that is scalable? And then adjusting that instead of taking a Band-Aid and ripping it all off at once, because you can't troubleshoot and you can't tweak. And then you're just left with this, well, we had all these sales and now we have no sales, or we have less than we thought. What do we do? And it's like, well, you've changed 65 variables at one time. So I think that is more often the issue that I see.